Us here on News 2, we interrupt that regularly scheduled programming for this breaking news. Michael Slager will spend 20 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Walter Scott. That shooting happening in 2015, April of 2015, and he will spend 20 years behind bars. The judge, Norton, came out today, day 4 of the sentencing phase of this. And he said that he was considering this second-degree murder. He also said that Michael Slager obstructed justice, and for that reason, he was considering a sentence at the least 235 months. He's going to get 240 months, which is 20 years. He said just before he handed down the sentence, the judge, and this coming from Rebecca Collette, who was in the courtroom, Michael led a spotless life. This shouldn't have happened. 240 months, no fine, 2 years of supervised release after that 20 years. You were just looking moments ago at the media staging area where we have set up outside of the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston. As people start to leave the courtroom, we're going to try and get a word with them on the reaction of what happened inside that courtroom as Michael Slager will now begin serving 20 years in prison. There you see that staging area. Of course, there is a bit of a period here after a sentence is handed down where people try to come to grips with what exactly went down. Walter Scott's family wanted the maximum. They wanted Michael Slager to spend life behind bars for what happened. He entered a plea deal in federal court admitting to violating Walter Scott's civil rights, but that also didn't set a minimum sentence, a sentencing guideline for the judge. That was 0 to life. The judge then had to decide with what he was given the type of parameters that he would judge this by. And he came out this morning and said this is second-degree murder. He had the opportunity to do second-degree murder or manslaughter. He said it was second-degree murder. He said there didn't appear to be any evidence that this was a crime of passion. And as we heard, he said that this should not have happened. And Walter Scott's brother, when giving his victim impact statement today, looked at the judge with a light bulb in his hand and said, "This is the reason my brother died, and it shouldn't have happened." Of course, that shooting all started with a traffic stop. Michael Slager pulling over Walter Scott because one of the taillights wasn't working. At one point, after Slager returned to his cruiser, Walter Scott took off running, and it ended in that field nearby where this whole stop started, with shots being fired. The prosecution driving home the point during testimony in the sentencing phase that the first shot wasn't fired until Walter Scott was 17 feet away. This started as a murder case in state court. That ended in a hung jury. The jury could not come to an agreement to convict or acquit Michael Slager when it came to that murder charge. The prosecution at one point during that deliberation said consider manslaughter. Put that on the table. You can consider that, but the jury didn't bite. They could not come to an agreement. And instead of going for a second go-around in state court, the plea deal that was entered in federal court means he doesn't have to go through another state trial. He will spend 20 years in prison. He also has 2 years of supervised release, but no fine attached to this. You saw moments ago outside the federal courthouse, we are waiting for people to come out now and address those cameras and tell us exactly their thoughts on what happened. Not sure if we're going to hear from the Slager side of things, if Slager's family or his attorney, Andy Savage, will be stepping to those microphones. We expect that we will hear from Walter Scott's family. Not exactly what they were looking for. They asked for life in prison for Michael Slager. The judge admitted or conceded that this was murder, second-degree murder. We don't have second-degree murder at the state level in South Carolina, but at the federal level that does exist. And the sentencing guidelines that the judge mentioned at the outset today when he was talking about the parameters with which he would be handing down this sentence, 235 months is where it started. So he's getting 240 months, which is 20 years. News 2's Rebecca Collette was inside the courthouse and has more details Rebecca, we knew something like this was coming in this general area, but just tell us exactly what went down here probably about 15 minutes ago.
Hey, Brad. It was definitely a really emotional experience in court today. Not only did we hear from all of the Scott family, the father, the mother, both brothers, sister-in-laws, and a nephew, we also heard from several people there to talk about Michael Slager. And what we heard about Michael Slager is that he lives a life of service, that he was in the Coast Guard, that he was an EMT, and he ultimately joined the North Charleston Police Department to help people. And the judge said he took that into consideration. And right before he handed down his sentence, what he told the court is that there was no doubt Michael Slager lived a, quote, spotless life. But they followed up and said this did not have to happen, and then he gave him 240 months. And I want to tell you, some of the most emotional testimony came from Michael Slager's wife before this sentencing was handed down. His wife told the judge that Michael is a good father to both her children from a previous marriage as well as to their 2-year-old son Isaac, and she said that she will be waiting for him when he gets out of jail. What that means is Michael Slager's youngest son will be 22 years old when he is ultimately released from prison. It was a very emotional time in court, although we didn't hear, like we did in the state trial, a lot of the crying. What we could see was that there were people crying, and the judge said that no matter what he ruled today, that one side or the other wouldn't feel like it was just. One side would feel like it was too much, one side would feel like it wasn't enough, but this is what the judge handed down: 20 years and then 2 years of supervised release, and it sort of just ended just like that. It was handed down and then it was over. As for what happens next, Brad, Michael Slager has 14 days to appeal this ruling.
All right, Rebecca Collette, inside that courtroom. We'll let you get free as we expect people to be coming onto that courtroom soon and anticipate at least some will be stepping to that microphone. This has been an extremely long 2+ years, 2.5 years, as we have progressed through this process from that April 2015 shooting to where we are now, where a sentence has been handed down. News 2's Carolyn Murray is here with us as well. I'll let you guys get her mic. You just let me know when you're ready, and we'll bring Carolyn in here. But we are ready. So, Carolyn, we've progressed through this. At one point, you start thinking, is this ever going to end? Because hung jury, they keep coming back. They don't have any sort of a verdict. Will there be another state trial? Then this plea deal comes about, and here we are nearly at the end of 2017, and we finally have some sort of closure on this.
Yeah, and having been a part of the first trial and having spent many days downtown Charleston watching go through the Charleston County Court proceeding and Ninth Circuit Solicitor Scarlett Wilson, I think that they are all probably, Brad, breathing a sigh of relief that there is some degree of closure. Closure for both families, as we just said, and we've been telling you this breaking news right now. 20 years for Michael Slager, and as Rebecca Collette just said, his son will be 22 years old when he is released from prison. And of course, we know that the Scott family has expressed that they have lost their son and that the children of Walter Scott will not be able to see their father. So this, of course, is something that Andy Savage did not hope. He hoped that the sentence would be much reduced than this 20-year sentence. He was hoping for something closer to 10 years and then also consideration for time served. But Judge Norton said that there was a degree of criminality in this act, that Michael Slager acted with excessive force in firing these shots against Walter Scott, which resulted in his death. And so I think that one thing that we will hear many times as we hear people walking out of the courtroom, both from Andy Savage as well as the Scott family, the solicitor, and those other parties involved, Chris Stewart, for example, the attorney for the Scott family, that they are all hoping that the general public will respond the way that they have for the past 2 years, and that is responding peacefully despite people being on both sides of this issue. Again, what we can tell you right now is that Judge David Norton has handed down a sentence of 20 years for Michael Slager, the former North Charleston police officer who shot Walter Scott April 4th, 2015. That is 240 months. Michael Slager will be on probation for 2 years. This just happening about 20 minutes ago in the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston.
I'll be curious to find out, and when these families, or hopefully we get to hear from both families, but especially the Scott family, they wanted him to spend life in prison. So I wonder if they will see 20 years as enough of a punishment for what happened. And you mentioned that Andy Savage asked for the minimum. He got very close to that when it comes to the second-degree murder, because the minimum was 235 months. He's going to get 240. So I'll be very interested to see where that lines up, because Judge Norton also said as he handed down that sentence that quote-unquote just punishment is in the eye of the beholder. So is it just punishment?
I'm certain or pretty sure that Chris Stewart, who represents Walter Scott's family, as well as State Representative Justin Bamberg, who's also on the team for the Scott family, that they will both respond. And as you said, Brad, this is not what they wanted. They actually wanted life in prison. So we will hear from them, I'm sure, just a short time. I'm actually trying to reach out to Chris Stewart right now to find out what his immediate reaction is. I imagine that he's spending time with the family. They will come together. They will, you know, with a united voice probably speak. We heard from Walter Scott's brother, you know, expressing some concern for the child of Michael Slager, but certainly emphasizing that Walter Scott's family has lost their son as well and will not see him again.
Some of the most dramatic moments today in court, those victim impact statements. Judy Scott, of course, the mother of Walter Scott, locking eyes at one point with Michael Slager, according to News 2's Rebecca Collette, who was there. At that point, Michael Slager started to cry. There were a lot of tears shed, but perhaps the most powerful moment came when Rodney Scott, the youngest brother of Walter Scott, was giving his statement. He held up that light bulb, that couple dollar light bulb that he says is the reason his brother is dead. That is what precipitated the traffic stop that ultimately led to the foot chase, the tussle, whatever the taser involvement was, the wrestling with over the taser, and then the gunshots that the prosecutors hammered home yesterday, that the first shot wasn't fired until he was 17 feet away.
Yeah, and of course I had an opportunity, Brad, to speak with Faden Santana, who the person who videotaped this scene using his cell phone video, which of course ended up being the catalyst for this entire thing. If it were not for that cell phone video taken by Faden Santana, we might not be here today and hearing this verdict from Judge David Norton. Let's go right now back to downtown Charleston. Rebecca Collette has been in the courtroom. We're going to Libba right now. Libba has been watching this case very closely, and we can find out more about some of the reactions she is hearing in downtown Charleston. Libba?
Hi, Carolyn, Brad. Yeah, we are here in downtown Charleston, but kind of awaiting the family members and anyone else who's taken part in this trial or the sentencing phase over the past few days. We are set up in the courtyard outside the federal courthouse, and we expect that's where everyone will come to make their statements. We know that people, the family of Walter Scott and the family of Michael Slager, were giving victim impact statements in court, but that's something, of course, that we didn't see as there are no cameras allowed in the courtroom. So hopefully we will see them come out and kind of deliver anything that they would like the community to know, deliver that to us out here in the courtyard. I will say that as soon as the verdict came down, there was, as soon as the sentencing came down, there was a lot of commotion around here as we're all just waiting for this to come to a close and to really hear what both sides have to say. We could hear, I expect that we will hear from members of Walter Scott's family as they have been vocal about this from the beginning. Judy Scott, Walter Scott's mom, as well as Rodney Scott and Anthony Scott, Walter Scott's brothers. We should see them come and speak. We also know that Michael Slager's father, Tom, also gave an impact statement in defense of Michael Slager. So we think he may come out and also speak to the press and deliver a message to the community. Also, we may hear from the government side, from the government who's been prosecuting, who has been doing the prosecution this whole time. We may hear from them. I know that they spoke a few months back when they first
sorry,
announced
we need to get over to
Michael
News 2's
Slager.
Rebecca Collette, Libba, as she is standing by now live with the family of Walter Scott.
Good evening. We're actually not with the family right now. We're with some of the community activists and legislators who have been in the courtroom and who are at the state trial, who have been supporting the African American community through this very difficult time. Guys, I'm just going to let you tell our viewers who you are and why you're here.
State Representative Wendell Gilliard, proudly representing District 111.
What do you think this sentence means to the African American community and to our community as a whole after the 2 years?
I'm glad you said that, because what impacts one community everywhere impacts all community anywhere. We have to understand that. You know, to me, it's beyond black and white. This is a humane thing, and we have to understand that. The bottom line, coming here for the last 4 days, the message that I'll be taking back Columbia, along with the representative of National Action Network, people like Elder Johnson, Dr. Nelson Rivers, we have work to do in our state. Okay, we have to understand that. If we don't understand that, we're going to have another situation as such. That's why you see us out here every day trying to promote the progress, the good and the welfare of our communities, because if we don't do that, then we've gone back and we've turned our back with a deaf ear, and that is very dangerous. We have to be proactive. We have to keep talking progressiveness, how we're going to move forward from a positive aspect, and the only way we're going to do that, and I want everybody to understand this, you cannot have social change without economic equality and justice for all. If we don't understand that, we're not going to change from the social aspect. My heart goes out to both families. I feel like a lot of these leaders that I was coming here with the last couple of days with, you know, we shared tears in there for both sides today, okay? Because we have to understand this is a human thing. It's not a black and white issue. This is a humane thing.
Let me pull you in, Elder. Tell us who you are first.
I'm Elder Johnson, James Johnson, the state president of National Action Network.
What do you make of this sentence? Coming out of a mistrial last year, a lot of disappointment for a lot of people that there wasn't some closure. What do you make of the closure here today?
Well, I think it sent a loud message across America today, especially the police departments all over America, that, you know, you just can't go around killing a black man and think you're going to get off free, which would happen in so many years. And I applaud the people in the state of South Carolina. They stuck with it, especially their solicitor, Scarlett Wilson. She stuck with it to see that, you know, justice will be prevailed. But then again, both families lose. You know, tears come out my eyes for both of the families today. Up until Michael Slager incident 2 years ago, his family said he was a good man, and I believe that. But you know, someone has died in there. Here's another Christmas 2 years going by without their Walter Scott. So I feel their pain also. But the family is a forgiving family, and they did forgiveness for Michael Slager, and Michael Slager acknowledged that he forgave them.
One of the things that came up during this sentencing was how the neighborhoods around where Walter Scott was shot have been policed over the years, and how the people that live in those communities, the community I actually live in where my father grew up, and I'm interested in your perspective about the conversation that came up about the policing in those communities.
Well, I think Andy Savage said a wrong message. We have good people in bad communities. So what he did is he painted those communities as a bad community, and everybody in that community is bad people, and that is so wrong. Nobody wants crimes in their community, not at all. And I think North Charleston itself didn't do a good job in influencing that community, because even today we got guns in our community. People are getting killed every week in our community because of the guns in our community. So we got a lot of work to do. And the civil rights organization are willing to work with North Charleston to deal with some of those crimes in that community.
Yes, sir. Guys, thank you both very much for being here, for your statements. Brad, you just heard from some of the community leaders as well as one of our legislators in this area. I'm going to send it back to you as we continue to talk to the folks in this area following the sentencing.
All right, Rebecca, thank you. It's been a day that looked like things were going really, really fast, and then there was this grinding halt, and then all of a sudden Judge Norton, without even taking a break after hearing from the Slager family,
Did that
went
surprise
right
you, Brad?
into it. It did.
Yeah.
It did. I expected there would be some sort of a break to kind of let things settle. But I think the judge, when he came out and said what he said at the outset today, that this was second-degree murder, there was no crime of passion involved, he obstructed justice. You knew this was going to be a multi-decade type of sentence. It just was. I mean, it was between 235 and I think 290 months. And opened the door. I think a lot of people were thinking, wow, this could be a long time that he spends in prison, because the door was also still open at that point. I think many people thought there was the possibility that a life sentence could be coming. I know the Scott family wanted that. But I think the one thing that kept getting lost in when a lot of people were reading the initial flurry of tweets coming out is there would be no variance, which meant that he was not going to break from the sentencing guidelines, which I think essentially took life off the table.
Let's take a look at some of the video we are seeing in downtown Charleston right now. This is outside the federal courthouse. The shot is pretty wide, but we anticipate in just a short time we will hear from members of Walter Scott's family. We know that his mother took the stand today, as well as his brothers, and we also anticipate hearing from his attorneys, those on the team for the Scott family, Chris Stewart, as well as Justin Bamberg. So we expect to hear from them. One of the other things that I think should be brought up, Brad, is that Andy Savage certainly pushed for a much reduced sentence, but took exception today in court when Judge Norton received advice or conferred in some way with a law clerk. I guess suggesting that the judge might vary in some way from the standard of the sentence. So we know that Andy Savage did do that today. He took exception, and I think that the judge dismissed that in some way.
Yeah, essentially saying that he doesn't come up with the sentence on his own. He confers and works with his clerks in coming up with what they think is the just outcome. But he also did add that caveat that justice is in the eye of the beholder, and whether this is a just sentence, 20 years for second-degree murder, that is what we will be discussing, and a lot of people in the community are going to be discussing for the months to come. Now, the question is, how quickly does Andy Savage file an appeal, if there is going to be one?
I think that will happen very quickly. Of course, he has expressed concern for his client's physical as well as mental health, that he has been in solitary confinement, Michael Slager, for some 23 hours a day, and that he is very concerned about that. So we will see. He has about 14 days, I think it is, to file an appeal, and we anticipate that will most certainly happen. We want to go back down to the federal courthouse right now. News 2's Rebecca Collette is standing with another community activist, Pastor Thomas Dixon, to find out what his reaction is to this sentence of 20 years in prison for Michael Slager. Rebecca.
Carolyn, thank you for sending it back out to us. This is obviously a very important figure, a face that we've seen a lot through this trial in this state level, and you've been here the last couple of days. As you came out, I'd just really be interested in your perspective on the sentencing today.
Long time, 2.5 years. On April 4th, 2015, there were 8 shots that were heard around the world. North Charleston and the Low Country has been on the spotlight ever since, and we were waiting patiently for justice to be served. Today, which is contrary to what normally happens in the state of South Carolina and didn't happen 1 year ago right here, had to go to a federal court, but today justice was served. Today the message was sent not only that Black Lives Matters, but in particular Walter Scott's life mattered in sentencing Officer Slager, the former Officer Slager, to 20 years.
One of the things that Scarlett Wilson said in court was that no matter what happened at the state level, in her circuit, this had such a big deal because it was at the federal level. Can you talk about why addressing civil rights at this juncture is so important?
It's really important. The state of South Carolina should realize their error in the fact that there have been very few prosecutions of law enforcement officers for these type of crimes. When it comes to civil rights, African Americans in South Carolina have continually been underserved, have been disenfranchised from this community. And law enforcement has levied unfair treatment within the African American community. Today, it's been uncovered at the level of a murder. And not only uncovered, but there's been a sentence handed down, which is something that's unusual here in South Carolina. Today, a message has been sent across South Carolina that equal rights for all and justice for all will eventually be the order of the day. Because as of right now, in South Carolina, liberty and justice for all is not the order of the day. If it has to start with law enforcement, well and good, but we also have problems in the school systems and other areas that need to be addressed. But today a message has been sent. Those 8 shots that were heard around the world has been sent. That message has been sent to North Charleston police departments and police departments across South Carolina, saying enough is enough, and it's time for us to treat everyone fairly and equally.
So where do we go from here now that we have this sentencing and this stage is behind us? What happens next? What do you want to see happen next?
What I would like to see happen next is that in North Charleston in particular, North Charleston City Hall and their police department have never really taken that responsibility that should be. We talked about inside of the courtroom, they talked about programs that need to be put in place that aren't put in place. There has not been, even through the mayor's office there, just that acceptance of, we really made a mistake this time. And the biggest mistake that was actually made was the fact that Faden Santana, the man that had the courage to step up with a video, in spite of fear and intimidation, still produced that video that led us to this day. Without him, we never would have gotten to this day. But to this day, outside of the social justice, the civil rights organizations recognition, City Hall in North Charleston has never said, "Great job, Mr. Santana." Faden did what we expect all citizens to do, to stand up against wrong and to recognize that it's an obligation of all citizens to stand against wrong. He did that, but the city has never given him any recognition. There should be a Faden Santana Day. He should be declared a hero and given that recognition and any kind of stipend, because he did what was necessary in order to promote the real will of the United States, and that's we support what's right and we stand against what's wrong.
I have to ask you this. This is an issue that comes up over and over and over again. Why did Walter Scott run over a taillight? And what would you say to the community when they're dealing with officers and these questions? What would you say about the running? Because the defense made an issue of it. The defense wanted Walter Scott to have some of the blame in this shooting. What do you say to that?
I would say that running does not constitute execution, regardless of whether he ran or not, over a broken taillight. Just like his brother said, his brother brought a $1.50 taillight into the court, and his brother died over a $1.50 taillight. We should be able to trust law enforcement to the point that their judgment calls will not include a jury decision and an execution. What Michael Slager did that day, even though Walter Scott ran, he decided that Walter Scott was not worthy of those things, a trial, a jury, and things like that. He decided that he was going to be judge, jury, and executioner right there. So whether Walter Scott ran or not is irrelevant. What we have to look at is what really happened. And what really happened was we had a law enforcement officer who was trained, supposedly trained, who was sworn to serve and protect, decide at the last minute, as a man got away from his custody and broke and ran and turned his back to him, this officer decided that, broken tail light or not, I'm gonna kill him. And it's obvious by the number of shots that was fired. 8 shots were fired, 5 hit Walter Scott, and it's funny, if you look at the video, 7 shots were fired, and then there was a pause between that 8th shot. You can't tell me that there wasn't a forethought and malice involved in all of that. He knew exactly what he was doing, and then he turned around and tried to cover his crime up. So let's look at the real criminal involved in this. And Walter Scott's running, that's not a criminal offense.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Now that we've come to the conclusion in the legal sense of this shooting, what do you make of the 240 months, of 20 years? I
would have preferred to see better, but if the family is satisfied with it, then I'm satisfied with it. 20 years is a good sentence. Less than that, I would have definitely had my issues. But 20 years is a good sentence handed down. It's a sentence that was handed down in a state that doesn't prosecute or doesn't indict, even indict law enforcement officers. So it is progress. You know, this man was guilty. The video clearly showed it. And I don't see how they came up with a hung jury a year ago. But they did. So now we went to the federal court, and the federal court decided, no, it wasn't. There's no need for any hung juries in it. This guy is guilty, and we're going to sentence him as such. 20 years, 240 months. I'll take it.
Let me ask you this final question this time. As just a person, as a man that lives in this community, what was the most poignant moment in court for you today?
As I listened to the Scott family recounting their interaction with their loved one, Mrs. Scott talking about her son, talking about how he called her Smurf, and at the same time as she was talking, Walter Scott's youngest son, Miles, broke down and had to leave the room there. And there's something that I didn't realize that happened in her conversation, was that while she was on the phone with him after he got tased, there came a point, because Walter Scott's son, Miles, was there at the time, that he actually took the phone from her and listened as his father, possibly even the shots were fired that killed him. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about that. I think that's a little too sensitive for me to ask him about. But he heard what was happening to his father, and he'll have to live with that for the rest of his life. And he'll have to find a way to reconcile his life with law enforcement and and respect for those who are sworn to serve and protect, which leaves a whole another issue. But the testimony, the pleas from the family today, as they recounted Walter Scott's life, Lamar's life as his mother called him, and the good times, and the fact that those good times will not happen from that day forward, and that there'll always be that space. The legacy in that family will be that video forever. 100 years from now, they'll be able to they'll still probably show that video. This was Walter Scott, and this is how he died in North Charleston at the hands of a police officer. That was important.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you.
Carolyn, I'm going to send it back into you guys. Actually, if we can just hold on, we'll just show you the Andy Savage's team. The defense attorney is leaving. Andy! Andy! I'm going to walk over and see if there's anything he wants to say. You guys got it?
Rebecca Collette downtown.
Yeah,
trying to chase down
Rebecca's
Andy
trying
Savage.
to reach out to Andy Savage as he and his wife and his team leave the courtroom. We'll give her an opportunity to do that. Pastor Thomas Dixon, someone who's very close to the Scott family.
Andy, anything you want to say about what happened today? It's a disappointing day for you, probably not what you anticipated.
All right, Rebecca Collette trying to get comments, reaction from the attorney for Michael Slager, Andy Savage, as he leaves the courtroom. Most often, traditionally, he has spoken with us, but today, not having anything to say to the media, perhaps upset, disappointed, not sure. Usually he does speak with us. Perhaps he will release a statement later. But again, we see Andy Savage and his wife walking away from the federal courthouse, not with the Slager family. We don't know if the family has already left the courthouse or not. Of course, we will continue to watch very closely, and we'll perhaps try to get comments from them as well. Of course, a very difficult day for both the Scott as well as Slager families. We understand those who want to maintain their privacy. But we will go back down to downtown Charleston right now, where Rebecca Collette. Rebecca, we know that you tried to get a comment from Andy Savage. He's not willing to speak with us today.
Right, Carolyn, you pointed out, usually very media friendly, usually very much ready to tell his story. Obviously, a disappointment today, and let me give you a little bit of perspective on why this was most likely a really disappointing day for them. They were arguing that what Michael Slager did was manslaughter, which would be about 10 to 12 years in prison. They were also asking for what's called a variance, and what that variance would have done is, because of the conditions that they were making the argument Michael Slager would have been in jail, they were asking the judge for even a further reduction. So they were anticipating Michael Slager serving less than 10 years in jail. And we now know that he is going to have to serve 20. A couple of other things at play here that happened in the courtroom. When Andy got up to speak right before we heard from the folks supporting Michael Slager, he took an issue with something the judge said. The judge said early on this morning that he had consulted with his law clerks as well as his wife, who is a pathologist. And so when Andy got up to speak, he was very frustrated, and here's why. He said that this was supposed to be the judge's full decision, and he shouldn't have been talking to any of those people about the decision. And he said that if this was a jury trial and a jury had asked the opinions of other people, that would have been illegal. So Andy said that what happened today was a violation of Michael Slager's constitutional rights to be before just the judge. So he was very frustrated in court about what the judge had said before he made any of his rulings today. And so leaving today likely very upset. In previous times when I have talked with Andy Savage, and I've been covering this since the day of the shooting, every time I've talked to Andy Savage, he has been completely convinced that Michael Slager was innocent of any wrongdoing. Not that he didn't shoot Walter Scott, but that he was innocent of doing anything wrong in that shooting. So to now be at this point, it's likely this is a very personal blow to him. 2 years of being involved in this case to end the way that it did. Totally, I assume, not what he's expecting from the previous conversations, and he probably taking it very personally, having become very close to the family. We even heard from one of the investigators that worked on this defense team, who was there speaking on behalf of Michael Slager today. So this entire team that's been rallied around Michael Slager has been very close with them, getting to know the family, getting to know Slager's newborn son, who was born just a couple of weeks after the shooting. So it's likely at some point perhaps we will hear from Andy Savage, but as you saw today, tight-lipped, stone-faced, heads down. If you saw the posture, obviously very disappointed. Carolyn?
All right, News 2's Rebecca Collette outside the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston, again explaining why perhaps we did not hear from the defense team for Michael Slager, Andy Savage, as he walked away from that courtroom. As Rebecca described, generally will give the media a word, a comment, some reaction, but not so much today after hearing that his client, Michael Slager, will go to prison for at least 20 years.
Be an important rule of law that is going to be probably in contention if and when the appeal is filed. I think Andy Savage set that up. You heard Rebecca Collette saying that may be the point of the appeal, is that the judge consulted with people, his wife being one of them, and his law clerk, in coming up with this sentence. I've reached out to some of our legal experts to try and find out if they know any rule of order in regards to that. You would think that Judge Norton would have a pretty firm grasp on what he can and can't do when it comes to sentencing guidelines.
Very good point,
like
Brad.
that. But
yeah.
and
I think it's exactly what you described. I think that it is exactly what he is setting this up, making this a point in the record that he took exception to that. It was, I'm not sure if it was actually a ruling and if the judge overruled on that, but that he set the guidelines for this so that it is on the record that the judge may have acted out of order in conferring with a law clerk during this proceeding, when it was supposed to be the sole responsibility of the judge, Judge David Norton, in this case, in handing down this sentence. So as you can see right now, we are looking at a podium outside of the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston. We have heard from the Scott family before. We anticipate hearing from Chris Stewart, Justin Bamberg, and other members of the defense team, and also, of course, from Walter Scott's brothers and perhaps even his mother. They have spoken many times. I've reached out to their attorney trying to perhaps get an immediate reaction from them. They have not responded so far. I imagine that they are speaking, they are are reacting. They are spending some time together before making an actual statement to the media. Of course, this is a case that has been watched very closely, not only in this community, but around the world as well. As we know what happened April 4th, 2015, when Walter Scott was stopped for a broken tail light. He was approached by Michael Slager, the police officer, at his car. After a conversation, the police officer walking back to the police cruiser, Walter Scott got out of his car and ran away. There was a period of time that we don't know exactly what happened. We can hear that there was some contact between the police officer and Michael Slager and Walter Scott, and then Faden Santana, someone who was walking to his job as a barber in North Charleston, happened upon this scene, saw this reaction or this interaction between Michael Slager and Walter Scott, took out his cell phone and started videotaping the shots that we now know resulted in the death of Walter Scott.
Once that video was released, it wasn't long before we saw North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey in front of cameras announcing that Slager would be charged with murder and that he'd been fired from the North Charleston Police Department. And that set into motion what has been a long 2.5 years, one that has seen a state trial and in a hung jury after weeks of testimony and hours, days of deliberations, where the Judge Newman, sent the jury back at least twice to try and settle on a verdict. They were even allowed to consider manslaughter, but they still could not come up with a verdict that would either convict or acquit. And that set into motion then the filing of the federal charges, and then ultimately this plea deal. And in the plea deal is where they avoided that second state trial, and here we are today. Second-degree murder is what he was sentenced under, and he will spend the next 20 years in prison.
News 2's Libba Holland is in downtown Charleston right now as well. And Libba, we know that you have been in that courtroom, in the media room as well, and probably had an opportunity to see and hear some of the reaction. You certainly heard the court proceeding today. Give us an idea of what you are seeing right now and also your perspective of what you heard in the courtroom.
Right. Well, Brad, Carolyn, I want to give you an idea of where I am compared to where Rebecca is. For anyone who hasn't been to the federal courthouse downtown, there are two entrances. There's one on one side where Rebecca is, and that's really the main entrance that you go into. And so she's been catching some folks that have been coming out of the courtroom, been sitting in that courtroom listening to the entire sentencing over this past few days. So that's where she caught up with Representative Wendell Gilliard, as well as Elder James Johnson with the National Action Network. And they are starting to trickle over to where I am. I am in the courtyard, which is on the other side of the federal courthouse. And so we're all staged here. This is where we're set up in case any of the family members or any of the attorneys want to come and give a statement to the press. You know, the thing is, we can reiterate what they say in the courtroom to you, but there's no cameras allowed in there. So if they came over here to speak to us on camera, it would certainly give you all at home a perspective of what's been going on in the courtroom, and to kind of see the players that have been a part of this and hear from them. So that's what we're waiting on right now. I also spoke with Representative Wendell Gilliard as he came over here, and you know, something that's been murmured around here is just it's just the impact that this whole court case has had on our community and on our country, on our state as a whole. Because think about it. Now, since this has been going on, police are wearing body cameras. Dash cam video is more accessible. It's just there have been some changes that have been brought because of this. And then the sentencing that came down today, Michael Slager to get 20 years in federal prison. You know, we heard Rebecca Collette walking with Andy Savage, Michael Slager's attorney, and he really didn't have anything to say about that. And so I think it just kind of has shown just how far it's come from the beginning. so we're really interested to see what the family has to say exactly to the community, to you at home. We as residents of Charleston have been watching this from the beginning, and so I think to have it all just come to an end today, it's a very emotional time for the family and for a lot of people who have been with this trial from the beginning, from the initial incident. It's been so long, and so just to have all of this here, it is kind of an emotional time. So we're hoping that the Scott family comes out. We understand that they should be out here shortly. I imagine that they're with their attorneys preparing what they might say to us. So we may hear from Judy Scott, Michael Scott's mother. Walter Scott's mother. We may hear from Walter Scott's brothers, Rodney and Anthony Scott. And then we also may hear from Michael Slager's family members. There were opportunities for Michael Slager's family members to give their impact statements to the judge, and we heard from Michael Slager's father, Tom. So it's a possibility that we could hear from him as well. We also expect to hear from the government, from the prosecutors in this case, to hear what they have to say. And the thing is, the judge did not give the maximum sentence. He went just the minimum sentence for second-degree murder was 19 years. He went just above that to 20 years. So it'll be interesting to see what the prosecution, what the government has to say about that, about his decision on that. So yes, it's kind of just a wait and see type of thing right now, where we're waiting on the family to come out here. But we've all been covering this, Carolyn and Brad, for so long that it's just, we can't wait to hear what they have to say as all of this has come to an end now.
All right, News 2's Rebecca Collette in downtown Charleston. Libba Holland. Pardon me, Libba. Libba has been in the courtroom, as well as Rebecca Collette. We are awaiting the family of Walter Scott to approach the microphone and to perhaps give their reaction, as well as members of their defense team. Traditionally, they have come out with a prepared statement, as well as just general reaction. And so we hope that they will come and speak with the media. The impact statements they gave just about an hour ago and this morning were very strong, and so we imagine that they are spending time together as a family before releasing a statement and reaction to the general public. Again, the very latest, if you are just joining us right now, Michael Slager sentenced to 20 years for second-degree murder for the shooting death of Walter Scott, which happened April 4th, 2015.
Michael Slager will spend the next 20 years in prison. They haven't told us where he will be spending his time. That, of course, will come quickly as far as what prison facility he will be held. But here is the official sentencing. You can see it on your screen. It's 20 years, 2 years probation, no fine. And this is the sentence for second-degree murder. The judge coming out first thing as soon as he took the bench this morning, laid out that he had decided that this is second-degree murder. He had the choice between second-degree murder or manslaughter, and Judge Norton ruled that second-degree murder applied here, as well as obstruction of justice, because he said that Slager misled investigators. When he handed down that sentence, he said that Michael led a spotless life until this point, and that this should not have happened. And in that agreement, he said he would spend the next 20 years in prison. He's in his 30s, he'll be in his 50s. His youngest son is about 2 years old. His son will be 22 when he gets out of prison. So this is a wide-ranging impact, the most devastating being that for the Scott family, as Walter Scott was killed in April of 2015, and that has what put us in motion here toward this. And you recall when that initially happened, I believe it was on a Saturday. I want to say it was a Saturday morning. The initial response was that this was, an officer fearing for his life. And as soon as that video came out, I think everybody had the same reaction to it when you first saw it, was like, whoa, this is going to be different. And it wasn't long that the mayor of North Charleston stepped to the microphones in front of cameras and said that this is a case of murder. He will be tried for murder.
It has also been very chilling, Brad. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to listen.
He's got a 1 minute to a press conference, okay. 1 minute warning to the press conference, I believe with the Scott family.
that listening to the raw video to hear Faden Santana and his reaction as he happened upon this scene between the North Charleston police officer Michael Slager and Walter Scott, just having the thought, the presence of mind to flip that cell phone up and to take that videotape, and as it has been repeated many times, if it were not for that, we would not be standing here today, and this scenario would have played out very differently. So we anticipate that we will hear from the team for the Scott family, the attorneys for them, as well as members of the Scott family. As we've expressed, they wanted Michael Slager to go to prison for the rest of his life, but we know that Judge David Norton has decided that, in fact, it is 20 years in prison. Chris Stewart, right now at the podium, we see Judy Scott as well as Walter Scott's father, Anthony Scott, Rodney Scott as well, the wives of them, South Carolina State Representative Justin Bamberg, as well as Faden Santana, the man who took that cell phone video of that shooting that happened April 4th, 2015.
One of the family attorneys, L. Chris Stewart of Stewart, C. and Felton. We told y'all that this wasn't over. We told you it wasn't over. Today is a historic day for civil rights, particularly in officer-involved shootings. This is one of the largest sentences ever. Being found guilty of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice is historic. And I hope that the entire nation understands how big this is and what this means for everyone, no matter what color you are. This is all people crave, is accountability. That's all that people want when you're questioning why somebody may be kneeling, when you're seeing why someone may be marching in the street. They're not doing it just to cause a fuss. They're doing it because the sense of accountability has been lost in officer-involved shootings. And many people have tried to separate everyone by saying because you want accountability, you're against law enforcement. But we don't buy that. I don't buy that. We respect and love the police officers that are out there every day risking their lives. And they are. If you hate every police officer, then you're the problem. But there's also a problem that goes unseen, that many people acknowledge with a march or a kneel, that justice like this does not happen. That's all people want. No matter what color you are, no matter what sex you are, people want accountability. Because when you have none, you have hopelessness. You have apathy. You have anger. We have to get this type of justice because being a police officer is one of the most powerful jobs in the country and should be respected. But that doesn't mean you're above the law. That doesn't mean you can do as you please. As the Department of Justice said during this trial and today, no one is above the law. So the death of Walter Scott, with all of the great reforms that have happened, can make the next officer think 1 second longer before pulling that trigger and changing an entire nation. Then it was all worth it, and he would be happy with the results and the changes that happened. We don't all have to be separated or divided. All we have to do is listen and understand why someone is upset, why someone has to hold a picture like this, why they have to watch as normally the officer hugs their family and walks out of court smiling. Don't think that this was given to us just because there's a video. Videos do not get you justice anymore. Anger and bricks don't get you justice. Determination, prayer, faith, and being the forefront of a family like this and never giving up gets you justice. And holding the Department of Justice accountable, making sure they keep prosecuting. Making sure your district attorneys fight and don't give up. Or don't prosecute because the victim doesn't look like them. That's what gets you justice. It's been an honor for all this time to represent this family and proud of the history that was made today. Ms. Judy Scott would like to say some words.
This is the day that the Lord has made, and I am rejoicing, and I'm glad in it. I thank and I praise God for each and every one of you all. I thank God for all the prayers that went up for our family. I thank God for the attorneys. I just thank God for everything that He has done. My soul is rejoicing right now because of Jesus. I thank God that He was in our lives.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Scott. I'm the oldest brother of Walter Scott. At the beginning of this ordeal, the family would desire to get justice. We feel like we have gotten justice today. We feel that we have moved on. And not only did we get justice today, but the truth was told. And we did not believe the original report. We did not believe that. We did not trust that. But at the end of the day, God had a ram in the bush. And his name was Santana, who was brave enough to film this horrendous act that was done to my brother. Our family has changed in a way that we will never be the same again. But through the grace of God, we have come a long way. And we have come through the storm and through the tears, but we have not fallen. Our head are not bowed, but we are head held high and proud to be here today and still seeking justice for Walter. And the process, you know, other families may not receive this, but we have set a roadmap for them to follow, to believe in God and try to keep the peace. We thank Charleston for keeping the peace. We thank the United States for keeping peace. And we do it the right way. And we may have not gotten enough time that we think that might be suitable, but we got time. And this is the first, and it's historical. And we did it all the right way. All the I's was crossed, all the our I's was dotted, all the T's were crossed. And we are very thankful and grateful for being able to be at this moment today. And we do thank God, and we thank everybody that had a part in this. And these gentlemen has been here with us from the beginning, Chris Stewart and Justin Bamberg. They have been the family attorneys, and we've been connected with the state and DOJ. And we really do appreciate them coming in. And I thought it would have been over sooner than now, but it's been a long ride for my family. And we've had a lot of heartache, a lot of crying, and we've seen our brother run and die many a times. And that can never stop and that can never change. But we find the victory. It says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy will come in the morning. And this is just a start to our joy. And we thank God for that. Thank you.
And next, Faden Santana will speak, who this wouldn't have happened without him.
That's right. Amen. Hello, my name is Faden Santana. Today, I know there's a victory for justice, there's a victory for the Walter Scott family, and for many other members of the community and the nation. It's not a victory for Michael Slager family, which is also not my victory, because I don't feel happy for the situation that another human being have to go through. I wish, that this will never have to happen. I wish he never had to take that bad decision that he did, that today I know that he regretted, and also his family. But I believe that sometimes sacrifice have to happen in order to make changes. And this is a big example. I hope that citizens and law enforcement can just see this all this journey as an example, and that we can respect our law enforcement. The law enforcement can respect our citizens. Can we as a human can respect human life? That we don't came to this world to destroy each other. We came to love each other. And that's all I can say. It's not easy. It's not easy, like I say, to the Scott family. I have been always neutral in this journey. My only side have only been justice and the truth. But changes have to come through sacrifice, and I just want to say that this sacrifice, can remark our position, our history, and everything, so we can come along as a community, as a nation, as human beings. Thank you.
And Justin and Rodney.
Good afternoon. My name is Rodney Scott. I'm the younger brother of Walter Scott. A songwriter wrote a song, said, "We have come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord." And that's exactly what we did 2.5 years ago. We started at the beginning trusting in the justice system, and today we made history, getting justice. My heart goes out to all the families that didn't get justice. And there's still a lot of work to be done in the justice system. But we can be thankful today, the Scott family. And hopefully it sets a platform for the future that all families will get the justice that they're still desiring to get. And I'm thankful for the justice system that worked on our behalf: Chris Stewart, Justin Bamberg, Scarlett Wilson, Eric Fishman. They did a wonderful job. The Scott family is pleased. I want the world to know that the Scott family is pleased. We got justice. And like I said, I hope that every other family that's still trying to get justice will get justice for their families. Thank you again.
And last comment, and then we'll take some questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've kind of heard by everything that can be said. My name is Justin Bamberg, one of the attorneys for the family, also a state representative here in South Carolina. 20 years is a long time, and it's a long time to think about this. And during sentencing today, Rodney, Walter's brother, stood up in court and pulled this out of his pocket. It's a light bulb. And it's important to remember how we got here. And we got here over this. A light bulb. A man lost his life after his vehicle was stopped for a taillight. And what we've got to do, yes, this is a sense of justice here, but the fight for justice can't stop here. And we all owe it to ourselves and those around us to continue to fight to make the system better. What Michael Slager did is he damaged this community, he damaged law enforcement, he damaged family lives, but he set us back. His actions set us back even further. And we've got to fix that. It's on government to step in and make sure that law enforcement officers are trained appropriately. It's on government to make sure that they step in and they fund local departments so they have the resources that they need, so that these officers are paid what they need. It's on us to hold government accountable. Get out and vote. Make sure you have people in place who don't want another Walter Scott. They don't want to see another mother have to stand up in front of the world, right, and lead them by faith. They don't want to see another brother have to stand up and talk about how night after night after night he receives his brother getting shot in the back. And they don't want another officer's family, another 1-year-old, to realize that for 20 years he's going to have to see his father behind a piece of glass. So yes, this is a good day, but this is only the beginning. So thank you all very much.
Anthony, Anthony, a question for you and Rodney. Both of you are Walter's brothers. Have you two...
We are listening now as the defense team as well as members of the Scott family take questions from members of the media who are there. Meanwhile, in summary, some of what's happened over the last couple of hours is we now know that Michael Slager will in fact go to prison for at least 20 years for the shooting death of Walter Scott, which happened April 4th of 2015. Just listening to the comments from, first of all, the lead attorney for the case, Chris Stewart of Atlanta, Georgia, who expressed not satisfaction ultimately that the sentence was not life, but satisfied that this has reached a conclusion and that Michael Slager will spend at least 20 years in prison. Also hearing, of course, from Judy Scott, the mother of Walter Scott, who in fact said that she is satisfied that this is coming to an end. Hearing from other members of the Scott family, his brothers, Rodney, as well as Anthony, and now hearing from State Representative Justin Bamberg. We know that Michael Slager will in fact have to serve at least 18 years of that. There is no parole in federal prison.
We want to go back out to downtown Charleston. Judy Scott again addressing the media during some of the Q&A.
Because of the love of Christ in me and because God forgave me. I had to examine myself because the forgiveness came so easily. But I thank God, having a background like I did.
At the same time, though,
Yes.
think that while you forgive, you still don't want anyone to forget that doesn't mean you absolve him. Or am I putting words in you? Am I making those words up for you?
To answer your question, in our forgiveness, the forgiveness does not say that us as a family do not want justice. We wanted justice for my brother. And not only did we want justice for my brother, but we wanted the truth to come out. And through the whole entire ordeal, there was a story that was told that there was a vicious fight. That my brother grabbed the taser. We as a family never believed that. We as a family never took the word of the officer at the time. And we are hurt, and we do have some type of passion for the Slager family, and that they have to suffer as well. And we do forgive Michael Slager for what he did. But yes, we did want justice for my brother, and we feel like we have gotten a sense of justice. It can't bring him back. It can't bring Walter back. But justice for what was done to him, and for all the days we have to watch him running over and over again, running for his last time and being gunned down and shot in his back.
Mr. Scott, 2.5 years after Slager shot your son, he took responsibility for that in court today. Was that important for you to hear?
I didn't hear what you said.
I said, ma'am, I said 2.5 years after he shot your son, Slager took responsibility for shooting him in court today. Was that important for you to hear that as a mother?
Yes, it was, but it was a little late hearing it because it took so long. I guess it takes some people that long to come to themselves, but I'm glad to hear it.
I can answer
and
that.
I'd like to thank also, I can't forget those that were there from the beginning, like Elder Johnson and Elder Rivers and Dixon and all them that was there by my side the whole time. I praise God for them.
I know that you said that the fight is not over, and even though you guys were able to get justice for Walter Scott, your brother, that the fight's not over for others around the nation. What are you guys going to do to be a voice for change?
Well, absolutely. We're going to support the teams that were trying to fight for families, other families that did not get justice. There's still a whole lot of work to be done as far as civil rights, family that has sons that has been shot and still not getting justice. So, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of work to be done, and we're definitely going to support because they supported us. And to answer his question, all the false narratives that were going on repeatedly for the past 2.5 years. And then every day we sat in court this week, we watched the film of my brother being shot. And it was fast forwarded, slowed down, frozen. And just to hear the gunshots. I mean, we relived 2.5 years ago this week. And when Michael Slager got up for the first time, because in my mind I said, wow, he never said sorry, he never showed any emotions. But today, he did. Whether he meant it or not, he did. He apologized to the family. He called each and every last one of our names in court today and apologized. So who are we not to forgive? We're all human. And whether he meant it or not, he said it. So it's whether we want to accept it or not. I accept it. I'm sure my family has. And we want to move on, you see. This is a new beginning, okay? So today sets a new beginning. We hope we set the tone for the entire world. We have to move on. My brother will never come back. We'll never ever see him again. I'm going to have my days. I'm going to hurt. My family's going to hurt. Family reunions, birthdays, celebrations, we're going to hurt. But we still have to move on.
As painful as that video has been for all of y'all to watch, and have to relive those moments over and over, Chris, Justin, do you think that we would have gotten the sentence that we got today without that video being out so early?
No, of course not. You have to understand one of the biggest things from the Walter Scott tragedy is you saw an officer kill someone and then move the taser next to the body to fit a story narrative that he had concocted in his head that he knew the media would just accept, he knew the public would just accept, he knew his supervisors would accept. And so now it simply can tell you maybe the person did not have a gun. That's right. Maybe the police department immediately coming out and saying this person was a drug dealer or alleged drug dealer or a criminal or a whatever the narrative is in these cases. That's done to make you all not like them. You all at home watching, it's to make you say, oh, their life doesn't matter as much because they were probably a drug dealer or they're black or they're poor or whatever it may be. That's what this shows you, is that you can't believe the initial narrative. You have to have someone that investigates these cases. We didn't even know the tape existed when we took this case. That's right. We took it because I didn't think a 50-something-year-old black man with a great family would attack a cop. I just didn't think it. I didn't believe that. So you can't believe the narratives. Investigate. If the cop didn't do anything wrong, great. He walks away. But if he did something wrong, simply hold him accountable. It's just simple.
One more question.
It's not.
What message do you think that this sentencing will send to law enforcement in communities of color?
Stop and think, or you can end up 20 years behind bars. You won't just get away every time. You can't just take a life that easy. You can't write them off as, oh, it's a poor black person or a poor white person or whatever it may be, and write them off saying that everyone's going to cover for you. The media is now looking into these situations. There's been reporters we've been working with that have been on this thing constantly. People are watching, and people are starting to actually care. And if they're not caring, they're being forced to care because people are demonstrating and making you pay attention. So that's what this lesson is about, is you have to just make sure that your first duty is protecting life and not easily taking it.
Thank you very much.
We have been listening to the response to questions from the media, from the family of Walter Scott, as well as the defense team for this Scott family, Chris Stewart, as well as State Representative Justin Bamberg, just answering questions about how the family will in fact move forward after this. But one thing that they wanted to make certain was that everyone understood just how difficult the last 2.5 years have been for them. What they said that has been most important to them is relying on their faith and being very patient, making sure that this community remained calm despite the circumstances and despite what we saw on that videotape that was taken April 4th, 2015. What we now know is that Michael Slager has been sentenced to 20 years in prison, 2 years probation, no fine, and that the charge is second-degree murder.
We don't know where he will be spending his time in prison. That will all be decided soon. We are expecting that an appeal will be filed by Andy Savage, the attorney for Michael Slager. He has a couple of weeks to do that. We will, of course, be keeping tabs on all of this as we move forward. We'll have complete coverage of this, the sentencing of former North Charleston police officer Michael Slager, coming up on News 2 at 5 and 6 o'clock.